In this video, I would like to give a very quick introduction to a piece of free software that I think deserves to be better known than it is, and that software is Twine. Twine describes itself as, quote, an open source tool for telling interactive non-linear stories, unquote. What they mean by interactive non-linear stories is stories that have a similar format to the old choose your own adventure books, but on a computer. So the format is roughly that you will be given some text. You can also have pictures and or sound, but text is the main way that the game will communicate with you usually. And then you have a series of choices that you can make. Usually the text is written in the second person, meaning it's written as if it's things that are happening to you. You are a monster hunter. You are a teenager at a high school. You are a such and such, and you find yourself outside the school. You find yourself outside the dungeon, whatever the story may be. And then you have a series of choices. You can go into the dungeon, you can search the area, you can turn around and go home, you can look in your backpack to see if you've got anything interesting, and so on. You, as the player, will click on the choice that you want, and then it will tell you what happens based on that choice. The format that I've described is a pretty simple one, and there is any number of programs that will allow you to make a game in that format. Twine is distinguished by not requiring any programming knowledge. You can make a game entirely without programming, actually. It has the ability to use programming, in particular JavaScript and CSS. CSS is a format for describing the appearance of web pages, and JavaScript is a more of a sort of general purpose programming language that's often used online. And you can certainly use either of those things. And most people who use the game do seem to use at least some programming elements, but you don't have to. You can make a quite elaborate, interesting story that people are going to want to play more than once without any programming at all. And that is the thing that I think that distinguishes Twine. And having made the game, it's very easy to publish it. If we look at itch.io, which is a very popular website for amateur game creators to sell their games, and we look at the Twine section, we can see that there's no shortage of people who have published their game, and some people are selling it. Some people are giving it away for free. This particular one is charging $10. Most of them seem to be less than that. Now that's obviously quite cheap for a computer game, and I can't say how many copies they're selling for $10, but people are selling it. Look, if you seriously know that what you want to do with your life is be a computer game developer, and that's going to be your career, I wouldn't start with Twine. I would start with probably a more general purpose but more complicated piece of software like Unity or something, one of the other ones that are similar to Unity. Apart from anything else, the sort of games that Twine is designed to make are not a very popular format. It's very difficult to make, difficult to impossible to make a sort of action type of game, a game that relies on sort of reflexes and the ability to quickly respond to an environment that's changing in real time. And that's what most people who play computer games seem to be most interested in, and that's not really what Twine does. But I think that the format that it uses is a very good format, a very easy format for creating interesting situations and interesting decisions and interesting outcomes. And if you agree, well, we can look at the game. But before we look at the game, let's have a look at some of the resources. I've already shown you the website for Twine itself. It's twinery.org, twinery.org, although I will, of course, link to everything that I've described in the description. I'm not going to go into how to download it. It's fairly straightforward. There's a download link there. It's the same for Windows, Mac, and Linux. I will say that I have used it mostly on a PC. I have used it briefly on a Mac, and it does look a little bit different, but not so different that my descriptions will be misleading to you. It's mostly a visual difference, actually, if anything. So I'm going to assume that you can download and install stuff. Obviously, if you have problems, please feel free to post in the comments and I'll do my best to help you. But you might not want to do that because there's a few places you can go to get answers. First of all, there is the Interactive Fiction Community Forum, intfiction.org. They have a Twine sub-forum, and it seems to be reasonably active. There seem to be at least sort of a few people a day posting there. I can't tell you much about this forum because I don't go there. I go to another one which is probably slightly more active, and that is on Reddit. Sorry, I've just entered the wrong. It's auto-completed when I didn't want it to. There we go. Reddit.com/r/Twine Games, so TWINEGAMES, and that is mostly people asking questions about how to do particular things. It's also people announcing that they've made something in Twine and giving links to it, but it's mostly a place to get help with questions, and I've made use of it several times, and I've eventually gotten an answer to my question every single time. Either I worked it out myself, or most of the time someone was able to help me. Not every answer was useful, but eventually I did get the answer. I will say that in my experience, some places on Reddit are really awful. I went to a subreddit aimed at new people on YouTube and asked a question and got absolutely piled on because it was a stupid question to ask as far as they were concerned. I don't think it was. I think it was perfectly reasonable. I went to another subreddit which was for what else did I go to? There's one for authors, and I got piled on there, and etc. etc. So there's some places on Reddit that are really toxic and full of people that enjoy finding noobs that they can bully basically over the internet. But Twine Games is not such a place. I've never had any problems of that kind. I've never had anyone sort of put me down or anything, and I was asking very, very basic questions, very, very noobish questions. So I would recommend Twine. That's not a criticism of the Interactive Fiction Forum. I honestly just don't know anything about it. I have literally never tried it, just because I was using Reddit before, and my first instinct was to see if there was a place on Reddit for it, which there was. Now, you might think the obvious place to go would be... We'll shut itch.io while I'm here. You might think the obvious place to go would be the Twine website itself. And there is a forum there, twinery.org/forum. Unfortunately, they shut it down. What they did is they shut it down for new posts, but they've kept the existing posts up there. I think the idea was, well, there's lots of answers that people have given about how to do particular things, and if people search on the internet for an answer and it goes to this forum and then the forum has been deleted, well, that's going to waste everyone's time. So we'll leave stuff up there. I can see the thinking. I think maybe they would have been better to delete it, because sometimes you want to ask a specific question and you'll come here and find that, well, of course, you can't ask any questions. And also, as new versions come out, existing answers become less and less complete and accurate over time. And this did shut down in 2017, so it's had a while to sort of drift. So beware of that. If you get on Google or whichever of those engines you use and ask a specific question, how do you such and such in Twine, you might end up going to the forum on the Twine website, and that might not actually be the best place to go. It certainly won't be the good place to go if you want to actually post your own question. But of course, there might be an answer that's useful for you. So let's X out of that and look at the actual program itself. This R-looking logo, which of course represents branching paths, is what it looks like. So you double click. I think the fact that it takes so long to load is a function of the fact that my computer's old and worn out and I should replace it. I don't think that would happen on a better computer like the one that you probably have. But anyway, you eventually get there, and you'll get all of the ones that you've made and saved so far. The difference in circles, all it's doing there is displaying how many pages you've created and how big the pages are. This particular one that I'm looking at here, called Chess-like, has only 3 pages, indicating that it's a very small program, and actually it's incomplete. It's something that I started doing and didn't continue with. Whereas this one here, the Cornucopia of Infinite Adventure, you can see that there are tiny little circles, and a lot of them, and that indicates that it's quite an elaborate program. And then the relative size of the circles. Unfortunately, the relative size tells you how big the individual pages are. So not a very useful feature, but that's what they do. So if you wanted to play either play one or update one, you would just hover over it and double click, and that would send you into it. But let's say we don't want to do that. Let's say we want to create a new one. We press this plus story button, the big green button. What should the story be named? Well, we're going to call this Cross the Bridge. This isn't going to be a very good game. It isn't going to be a very interesting game. It's just a demonstration. This is what you see when you start a new story. There's a couple of little unfortunate things. First of all, you might think, I don't want to start a new story. I want to go back and work on one I've already done. I know what I'll do. I'll press this X button. And normally that would be the right thing to do, because normally pressing the X button, if you're in a specific file, in most pieces of software, pressing the X takes you out of that file, but back to the sort of front page or the starting hub for the piece of software. In this case, pressing X will get you out of the program altogether, and what you want to do is press the little house icon, which means home, which is in the bottom left. Thus. And then we'll start again. So that's a not particularly great piece of design, but once you get used to it, it's fine, of course. A story with this name already exists. What have I done? Oh, I see. It saved it. As you can see, it saved it, and it's just one big circle because we've only got one page. So we'll double click into it, and it'll take us in there. You can drag around the pages. That doesn't have any effect on the play experience. It's just to you might find particular parts of the screen getting crowded or complicated, or you might want to move things around. There's another annoying thing, which is formats. If we click on this little menu here, we can see story format, and what it says is a story format controls the appearance and behavior of your story during play. For some reason, there are multiple formats. You have to choose a format. Halo is the default. And the appearance of the story when you're playing it, and also what commands you need to use to make particular effects happen, is different between different formats, which is really annoying. And I don't think it's justified to have multiple formats. I mean, there's 4 possibilities here, and you can install, there's at least sort of one other, I think, that you can install if you want to. And what that means is that you might go to a web page and get an answer as to how to do a particular thing that you want to do. And then it won't work because the answer is for Harlow and you're working in SugarCube or vice versa. Also, it means that if you ask a question, you should always put the format that you're using first so that people don't give you an answer that is no good for you. I personally have found SugarCube to be slightly different. I don't think there's an enormous amount of difference between them, but anyway, as I say, I don't think it's justified having multiple formats, but that's the decision that they've made. So we changed that to SugarCube. And if you're going to use SugarCube, every time you start a new story, you have to make sure to change the format to SugarCube. Otherwise, you'll enter some commands that worked last time and did what you wanted last time, and then suddenly either the story won't work at all, or at least it won't do what you want. So we're going to make a very simple story here, just to demonstrate how you can do it without any programming. So you double click on a given page to edit it. The heading doesn't matter very much. It's mostly just for you, the author, to keep track of what's happening. But let's call that start. Yeah, well, I did double click anyway. I'm going to enter you are standing at one end of a bridge. Now this basically just works like a very simple word processing program, or like when you're entering a form in the internet or something like that. Let's say that you have two choices. Try to cross the bridge and try to swim across the river. Now you'll notice that what I've done is I've put square brackets around the text that is a choice. So again, you don't have to save the page to make it be saved. It saves automatically as you go. You just X out of it, and we will find that a few things have happened. One, the page that was already there has updated. Sorry, I should say that the little green and white logo, which you probably can't see very well, but it's meant to be a rocket ship, that's just telling you where the game starts if you play it. Anyway, that page has updated. It's now headed start, and you might not be able to see this because unfortunately it's in sort of grey, but it now has the text that I've put in, which says you are standing at one end of a bridge, and gives you the choices: try to cross the bridge and try to swim across the river. And also it's created pages for those choices. It's created a page called try to cross the bridge, and it's created a page called try to swim across the river. And so when you play the game, of course, it'll give you those choices, and if you click try to cross the bridge, it'll send you to that page, try to cross the bridge. So let's have some outcomes. Try to cross the bridge. If you try to cross the bridge, you cross the bridge and you win. We won't have any choices because that's the end. And if you try to swim across the river, you drown, you lose. So I think you'll agree that is a complete game, though perhaps not going to win any awards. But let's say we've written that, we want to make sure it does what we think it's going to do. So you can test, but I'll get into that in a later video. Hopefully there'll be enough interest in this video for there to be later videos. Normally what you'd do is you'd go play. So I press play, and it will load whatever your default web browser is. Actually, in my case, it's Google Chrome. And unfortunately, it loads it with the address bar, and it loads it with your all your what are they called? Your bookmarks by default. There's a fairly easy command that gets rid of those things and just gives you an empty frame, so you can't tell that it's using Chrome or Firefox or whatever you use. But again, I'll get into the sort of details later. I just want to show how you can do a game without any programming or formatting whatsoever, apart from links. Sugar Cube has the option to save your game. With a game this size, that's probably not very useful. And to restart, well, again, not very useful for a small game, but you can see how they'd be useful for a bigger game. And then you can go back or forward in paragraphs if you've already started playing the game. You can also just choose to get rid of all that if you don't want to look at it as the player. So you're standing at one end of a bridge, try to cross the bridge, try to swim across the river, and we can see that try to cross the bridge and try to swim across the river are in blue, which is the usual default color for links on the internet. So it sort of tells us that they're choices. So let's say we try to cross the bridge. Oh, you cross the bridge, you win. Now I can choose to go back, or I can choose to restart. I'm going to restart. Are you sure you want to restart? Yep, I'm sure I want to restart. Let's say we try to swim across the river. You drown, you lose. So we can see there that it's doing what we wanted it to do. 3 paragraphs, one of which you win the game and one of which you lose the game, and one that you start with is probably not very interesting. You probably wouldn't be able to sell that for $10, but you can see how you can make more and more choices, more and more paragraphs. It can be essentially as big as you like. Saving text uses up so little memory that really the limit is how many pages are you prepared to make, basically. And you can see how you could make a quite interesting game without any programming whatsoever. So, as I say, that is Twine. That is the very basics of Twine. There's much, much more you can do with it. And hopefully there'll be interest in this video and I'll be able to make more videos getting into the details. Perhaps you want to have a character that has attributes. Perhaps you want to keep track of particular states in the game. Perhaps you want to have a character who you can sort of help or be hostile to, and then later in the game they will act in a particular way based on how you treated them, and you want to be able to keep track of that. That's all really, really easy. As I say, I'll get into it in a later video, but you don't have to do any of that. But I don't have anything more to say. Hopefully you find it interesting. As always, if you have a specific question, certainly you can comment, and I'll try to answer it. Although I would recommend the Reddit really as a place to get sort of, if your answers, if your questions are more technical, I probably wouldn't ask me, but I can certainly easily answer very simple questions. And hopefully I will see you next time.